Good morning, students. What I was saying in the previous class, no? That is a law of conservation of total linear momentum. So, momentum, where the momentum it will be conserved, and impulse, and then unit of impulse, and application of impulse, and examples for law of conservation of momentum that all are discussed in the previous session. In the today's session, I explained that friction. What's the meaning that friction, ma? Friction means one force it will be created in between the two bodies. The two bodies will be moving one by one to another. Some force it will be created in between the two movement objects or rest objects. That will be called as friction. So I have to rub on our hands. The friction it will be created in between your hands to create the heat. That will be called as friction. So friction, in the category of friction we have various topics. First one is static friction. Three types of friction is there: static friction, kinetic friction, and rolling friction. Static friction and kinetic friction. Static friction means one object will be in a rest position. Okay, one object will be in a rest position. It will be in contact with the table. Okay, it will be contact with the table or book or hand or any objects. We have to try to apply the force on the object. The object will be moving forward, but some frictional force it will be act is in between the object to the floor or in object to the desk and between the object. So some force it will be oppose the motion of an object. ஒரு ஆப்ஜெக்ட் இருக்குது, ஒரு டெஸ்க் மேலேயோ புக் மேலேயோ வச்சுக்கிங்க, நீங்கள் ஃபோர்ஸ் அப்ளை பண்ணுறீங்க. அப்ளை பண்ணும்போது அந்த ஆப்ஜெக்ட் வந்து மூவ் ஆக ஸ்டார்ட் ஆகுது, பட் ஒரு ஃபோர்ஸ் அதுக்கு ஆப்போசிட் ஆக்ட் ஆகி அந்த மூவ்மெண்ட்டை ஸ்டாப் பண்ணுறது இட் வில் பி கால்ட் அஸ் ஸ்டாட்டிக் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன். The friction it will be used to oppose the starting point of motion. So one object will be trying to move. So the opposite force it will be act to stop the object. It will be it will be gives the opposite force to the movement of object. Okay, that will be oppose the starting point of motion. It will be called as static friction. So that object will be in a stable position. Okay, so stable position, that is first one. And first point of the kinetic friction is one particle will be moving in the forward direction. So another one opposite force it will be act to restrict the motion of an object. It will be trying to stop the object. That will be called as kinetic friction. ரெஸ்ட்ல இருக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு ஆப்ஜெக்டை மூவ் ஆக விடாமல் தடுக்கிற ஃப்ரிக்ஷன் பேர் ஸ்டாட்டிக் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன். மூவ்மெண்ட்டில் இருக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு ஆப்ஜெக்டை மூவ் ஆக விடாமல் மூவிங்லேயே இருக்காமல் ஸ்டாப் பண்ணுறக்கூடிய ஆப்போசிட் ஃபோர்ஸ்க்கு பேர் தான் கைனடிக் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன். ஓகே, ஸோ ஸ்டாட்டிக் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன் அண்ட் கைனடிக் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன். அண்ட் செகண்ட் ஒன் இஸ் independent of area. What's the meaning that independent of area, ma? We want to keep one object on any one floor or desk or anything. It will be lying in one area. That the area point the friction does not to be created. The static friction and kinetic friction, both the friction does not take into the area to be taken into account. ஏரியாவை ரிலேட் பண்ணி ரெண்டுமே இருக்காது, ரெண்டு டைப் ஆஃப் ஃப்ரிக்ஷனும் இருக்குது. ஸோ ஸ்டாட்டிக் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன் அண்ட் கைனடிக் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன் இட் இஸ் ஆல்சோ இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் ஆஃப் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன் அண்ட் தென் டிபெண்ட்ஸ் ஆன் ஃபோர்ஸ். இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் ஆஃப் ஃபோர்ஸ். ஸ்டாட்டிக் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன் இஸ் டிபெண்ட் ஆன் ஃபோர்ஸ். ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள், we have to keep one desk on any one book. We have to gently apply the force on the desk. The duster just is moving forward. You have to strongly apply the force on the duster. The duster will be moving spontaneously and to the another one side. So the force strength it will be create the static friction. It will be exceeds the static friction. So the object will be easily moved to the another side. Okay. So depends on force, that is the static friction. So independent of force. Independent of force means kinetic friction is there. The object will be in a moving. We have to apply the force on the object. The force is not necessary factor to movement of any one object. It will be the statement will be said by Kalvi. Okay, so static kinetic friction is the independent of force. And fourth one is static frictional force. எப்போ static frictional force maximum ஆகுமோ it will be always greater than the kinetic frictional force. So kinetic frictional force and static frictional force is there. Static frictional force is always greater than the kinetic frictional force, and μs and μs is coefficient of static friction. What's the value that static friction is there? That the value will be called as coefficient of static friction. What the value the there, it will be called as coefficient of kinetic friction. So static friction is always greater than that of kinetic friction. Sorry, kinetic coefficient of friction. So that all are the points in the static friction. For a kinetic friction not to be never to be zero. எப்பவுமே zero ஆகாது. Always the kinetic frictional force it will be always lesser than the static frictional force, and the kinetic coefficient of friction it will be always lesser than the static coefficient of friction. So this is the difference between static and kinetic friction. Is the important 2 mark you have to learn thoroughly. Okay. So what is static friction? What is kinetic friction means? The friction it will be act is in between the two rest particles. The particle will be trying to move the outer side. The one force it will be act in between the floor and the object. Does not allow the object to be moved. That will be called static friction. And kinetic friction also there. The static friction opposes the starting point of motion, opposes the relative motion, and independent of area, and depends on the force is the independent of force, and maximum for static frictional force it will be greater than the kinetic frictional force, and maximum coefficient of static friction will be greater than the coefficient of kinetic friction. Okay. So there is another one friction is there, that is a rolling friction. Rolling friction means any one object will be compare the kinetic friction and rolling friction. Kinetic friction means we take one book, we use one duster, the duster will be moving forward, it will be in a contact with the book. The duster will be in contact with the book, it will be moving forward, but you have to apply gentle force, does not enough to the duster to be moved. But we keep some roller, so in between the duster and the book, easily that object it will be moved because the roller is there. The roller it will be reduce the friction between the duster and the book, so easily the duster it will be moving on the book. So roller it will be used to increase the movement of any one object, increase the motion of any one object. It will be called as rolling friction. By roller backs it will be used to carry the high weight. The wheel it will be used in the roller backs. It will be apply the rolling friction on them. And then bicycles will be having the rib part having some ball bearings. The ball bearing will be apply the rolling frictions. So rolling friction is nothing but we keep the book. It will be easily touched with the floor. Cannot move easily to the other one side, but we using some pencils, a pen. So in between the book and then floor, the book or pen it will be easily the book or any object will be easily move on the pen or pencil. So the pen or pencil it will be act as a roller in between the two bodies. So as a roller it will be used to create the friction. It will be called as rolling friction. Okay, so 3 types of frictions. So one is static friction, and one is kinetic friction, and third one is rolling friction. So that is 3 friction will be used in the physics phenomena. Okay, and next one is angle of friction. What is the meaning of the angle of friction? Some angle will be created in between the normal force and the static friction force. Static friction force means one object will be move over on another object. The object applying external force, the object will be moving forward. And static friction forces will be acting opposite. It will be does not to be allow the object to be moving part. So some friction force will be acting opposite, and normal force will be acting upwards. The resultant force in between the static friction force and normal force it will be going on to the center part of the 2 lines. That is the resultant force. The angle between the normal force and resultant force will be called as angle of friction. So the angle of theta is the angle of friction. Theta is the angle between the normal force and resultant force. Is it clear, ma? So resultant force is equal to square root of static friction force plus normal force. Square of the static friction force plus normal force. Okay. So maximum static friction force square. Maximum means whichever will be having the greater value of static friction force. That is static friction force square plus normal force square will be giving the resultant force. Okay. So tan theta is equal to static frictional force by N, normal force. Ratio of normal force and the static frictional force will be giving the tan theta. So tan theta it will be the opposite side by adjacent side. The theta is the angle is there. The opposite side is opposite side will be the frictional force and then N, normal force. Static frictional force is equal to mu s into N. So another one formula is static frictional force, maximum static frictional force is equal to coefficient of static friction into normal force. So it will be equal to one another. Tan theta is equal to both the term it will be same. So mu Fx maximum we have to write mu s N. So mu s N by N and cancel mu s is equal to tan theta. What's the meaning that coefficient of static friction it will be equal to the tangent angle of friction. Tangent of angle of friction. Theta is the angle of friction. Mu s is the coefficient of static friction. So the coefficient of static friction it will be equal to the tangent of angle of friction. So this is the concluded point. It will be give the angle of friction. Whatever way the object will be lying to the bottom surface, that the angle it will be tells the coefficient of static friction. Clear that now? So the finalized point is coefficient of static friction will be equal to the tangent of angle of friction. Okay, clear that? Okay. And next one is methods to reduce the friction. What's the way the friction to be reduced? What's the objects it will be used to reduce the friction? So friction we use the ball bearing. Already I told the ball bearing it will be used to reduce the friction is between the two objects. And another one is in the machineries we continuously working. It will be machines will be continuously run. It will be ride over on another one object. The machines it will be ride over on to the two machines. And the machine one of the friction it will be definitely it will be some tear or some wear is there. So some tear is there, automatically the machine it will be so the strength of the machine it will be reduced. So how to reduce that? Some oil will be poured in between the two machinery parts. The machinery parts it will be easily friction is over on another one machine. It don't does not to be rust and does not to be some tear is there. Okay. So what's the way? Some oil or grease it will be used. Oil or grease to be used. Ball bearing will be used to reduce the friction. And we play on carom board. The carom point, some powder it will be split over on the carom board. The powder it will be giving the greatest friction forces in between the board and point. The point will be moving easily forward on the powder. That way it will be easily increasing the friction is between the two objects. So anyway, the friction some phenomena the friction it will be good, some phenomena the friction it will be not good. Okay, so we walk on the cement floor. The floor is having some water. You have to put your feet. So you have to stand on the oil or stand on the water on the floor. You easily skid. Why? The water or oil will be reduce the friction is between the feet and then floor. So the easily we have to skid on the floor. Okay. So sometimes the friction it will be important. Sometimes the friction it will be disadvantages is there. Having some disadvantages is there. Have to learn that. Okay. And next part is push or pull. We have to push one object. We have to pull one object. Which is easier? That is the question. Push an object or pull an object. What is easier now? You have to tell that push an object. So we have to thought that pushing an object will be very easy. No, it will be wrong. Why? We have to calculate the normal force. Normal force we have to apply the force on the object. Okay, we have to apply the force on object. The object will be moving forward. So object having some weight and then force it to be applied. The horizontal component force it to be considered as F cross theta. Okay, one object is there on the desk. Okay. one book it will be lying on the table, one book it will be lying on the table. We have to apply on the verb. Okay, so horizontally the weight it will be having and horizontal force it will be called as F cos theta. So the force is to be equal to the addition of weight mg plus F cos theta. To be clear that ma? So mg plus F cos theta, that will be the horizontal component which will be act. The total force we have to push on an object. The force it will be equal to the weight of an object plus horizontal component of force. So mg plus F cos theta. Already we know that n is equal to coefficient of static friction into n push. N push means mu s into n push. N push means normal force it will be acting the push. So normal force it will be acting on the push. N is equal to mg plus cos theta. Now to be Fx maximum is equal to Fx maximum. That is push. Push பண்றதுனால வரக்கூடிய force Fx maximum is equal to mu s into mg plus cos theta. Then Fx pull, F pull, force on pull is equal to, pull means keep one object you have to pull. So pull means you know so the force it will be acting opposite. So therefore force it will be acting horizontally, therefore force it will be taken as F cos theta. But we pulling an object, we have to apply it to be the thing it will be moving forward, backward. So the backward means the opposite force will be acting. Opposite force will be taken as minus F cos theta. So mu s mg minus F cos theta. So this is mg plus F cos theta. This is mg minus F cos theta. Which will be greater ma? So the normal force will be acting on pull. It will be greater. So if the normal force it will be less, automatically the force it will be moved forward. In the normal force is stronger, and the force and the thing easier move on there because normal force it will be acting upwards. The object does not to be easily moved. But which position the normal force it will be less, automatically the thing it will be moving forward. So this point, pull point, normal force it will be less, automatically the thing it will be move easily forward. So pull an object it will be easier to move an object. Pull பண்ணி ஒரு object நீங்க move பண்றது ரொம்ப easy comparable push. Okay, so push or pull of any one object which is easier na. So pull an object it will be easier comparable to the push an object. What a way we conclude that we take the normal force will be considered for pushing and we apply force on the object for pushing side. We push an object, it will be create some force, that the force it will be equal to the weight plus horizontal component of force, that is mg plus F cos theta, that is mu s. And pull an object, we create the force, that is mu s in the end, static friction force in the mg minus F cos theta. And then pulling side, the normal force it will be less because they are having the negative sign. So the negative sign, the pulling force it will be less. So easily the normal force it will be low, easily that object will be easily moved. So one object easily move ஆகணும்னா pull பண்றதுனா better way comparable to push. Okay, and then next one, angle of repose. What's the meaning of repose? Repose means pose. Pose means to fix and pose one object easily slide over on an inclined plane. ஒரு object inclined plane ல ரைட் ஆகணும் அப்படினா அதுக்கு என்ன மாதிரி நீங்க angle set பண்ணணும், that is called angle of repose. So angle of repose means it will be easily equal to the angle of friction, but angle of friction will be using all the surfaces, but angle of repose it will be using the inclined plane only. Okay, so inclined plane மட்டும் தான் angle of repose நம்ம யூஸ் பண்ண முடியும். Repose is nothing but the angle between the sliding an object in the inclined plane. Inclined plane la ஒரு thing வந்து ரைட் ஆகுது அப்படினா அதுல இருக்கக்கூடிய angle என்ன, angle of repose. So angle of repose is I draw one diagram. Okay, so that diagram will be having that is one inclined line. Okay, the object will be slide over on the inclined line. Two forces will be acting, that is normal force in the vertical direction, normal force, and weight will be classified into two components, one is mg cos theta and mg sin theta. Mg sin theta is the parallel component and mg cos theta is the perpendicular component. Friction force will be acting opposite of the mg sin theta. Okay, so that is called angle of repose. The angle between the flow on a sliding surface will be called as angle of repose. So what is the angle of friction? The angle between the normal force and the resultant force will be called as angle of friction. This part angle of repose. Angle of repose means ஒரு inclined plane இருக்குனா அது floor கிடைக்கிற angle of repose. So one object will try to move on an inclined plane. Two forces will be acting horizontally or vertically. Vertically, the downward force will be acting, that is a weight, that is mg cos theta. The weight will be resolved into two components, one is mg cos theta and one is mg sin theta. Mg cos theta will be parallel to the weight, mg sin theta will be perpendicular to the weight, and mg sin theta, the opposite force will be acting, that is static friction force. So static friction force will be opposite with one another of the horizontal component of weight, and the normal force will be opposite one another of the vertical component of the weight. Okay, so this is the way we easily calculate the angle of repose. So first case, in the vertical, normal force will be equal to the weight in the perpendicular component. So mg cos the normal force will be equal to the mg cos. So the normal force will be equal to, that is what is this now? Weight, it will be acting vertical. So in the vertical part, the vertical component of weight will be taken as mg cos. So normal force will be equal to mg cos. Formula is the coefficient of static friction Fs is equal to Fx maximum by normal force. So we substitute the normal force value, so the Fx maximum by mg cos. And second is we have to take vertical and consider pantom, horizontal consider pantom. Horizontal two forces will be acting. One is static friction force, and one is horizontal component of weight. So Fx maximum is equal to mg sin theta. So we have to consider this force, it will be equal to this force. So mu max is equal to, we substitute Fx maximum by, that is mg sin theta. Two equations is there, we equating on two equations because the left hand side is two equations are having mu max. So mu max is equal to Fx maximum by mg cos theta and Fx maximum by mg sin theta. Two terms are having some common terms. The common two terms will be cancelled. Fx maximum cancel, mg cancel. Balance 1 by cos theta and 1 by sin theta. The sin theta will be taken as the upside of the numerator part of the first term. So sin theta by cos theta, term theta. So mu max is equal to term theta. So the angle of repose by angle of friction, it will be giving static coefficient will be equal to the tangent of angle of friction. So almost angle of repose it will be equal to the angle of friction. But angle of repose it will be applicable in the inclined planes. But angle of friction will be applied in any surface, straight line surface, moving in a straight forward floor or anything. Okay, so this is called as angle of repose. What are the application of angle of repose? Okay, angle of repose and angle apply panna. First one is the angle sand traps. Angle sand trap means we have to see, have you seen on the sand floor some bending part is there, that is this angle traps, sand traps. Okay, angle sand traps na மண்ணில் ants வந்து என்ன செய்யணும்னா சின்ன சின்ன குடி மாதிரி போட்டுருவேன் அப்படின்னா ஏதாவது ஒரு ப்ராப்ளம் இருக்குது அப்படின்னா ஈஸியாக இருக்க போய் உட்காந்துடும், இந்த போய் உட்காந்துடும். ஸோ இது பேர் தான் ஆண்டனியன் சாண்ட் ட்ராப்ஸ். ஸோ the antennas will be slide on the inclined part and easily it will be going inside of the sand. Sandல ஒரு சின்ன பெண்டிங் பார்ட் மாதிரி போட்டு அதை ஈஸியாக ஸ்லைட் ஆகி இந்த சின்ன ட்ராப் மாதிரி இருக்கக்கூடிய பாயிண்ட் பார்த்தோம். இதுக்கு பேர் angle sand traps. Okay, angle sand traps is a very good example for angle of repose. Okay, so angle sand traps, it will be having some sliding edge surface. The ants actually easily slide on by using the trap spot. They easily it will be going inside of the sand. You have to predict. You have to take the security part of the part from the enemies. Okay, so ulla poi idukala angle sand traps. And second one is sliding over on a sliding board. Sliding board. In the part having the sliding object, we easily slide over on a one book having one picture, page number 144, diagram 3.31, sliding board. Sliding board is the example for angle of repose. Children are playing on the path, the sliding board. We sit on the top side of the sliding board. Easily it will be slide over on the sliding board, because if it's in the angle of friction is applied, it will be in the sliding board and the floor. Okay, the angle of inclination will be greater than the angle of repose. Easily slide over on the sliding board. In the sliding board, the angle of inclination it will be greater than the angle of repose. It will be easily slide over on the sliding board. Okay, that is the way easily one person will be slide on the sliding board by using the angle of repose. Okay, but the angle of inclination it will be very much angle of repose it will be very much greater than the angle of inclination. The person it will be ride over on the sliding board definitely be hurt. Okay, so the angle of inclination விட angle of repose வந்து அதிகமாக இருந்துச்சு அப்படின்னா ஸ்லைட் ஆகி வரும்போது கீழே வந்து ஃபோர்ஸாக வந்து ஃப்ளோரில் வந்து கிட் ஆகி அவங்க ஹர்ட் ஆகிறதுக்கு நிறைய பாசிபிலிட்டி இருக்குது. Okay, so this is the example for is the application for angle of repose. And another one point is there, measuring of coefficient of static friction. How to calculate the measuring of coefficient of static friction? So by doing one activity, easily we measure the coefficient of friction. Okay, so take one book, you keep one coin on the book, and then we taking one book, it will be having some inclination is between the many pages of the book. Or inclination part மாதிரி நீங்கள் ரெடி பண்ணுங்கள். So then if you arrange one coin on the top side of the book inclination, the coin does not to be slide over on the top side of the book, but the inclination it will be increased. The coin it will be easily slide on the top side of the book. Okay, ஒரு புக் மேலே காயினை வச்சுட்டு நீங்கள் புக்கோடைய சென்டர் பார்ட்லேருந்து கொஞ்சம் கொஞ்சமாக இன்க்ளினேஷனை இன்க்ரீஸ் பண்ணுங்கள். Inclination or particular limit to varavaraikum, the coin does not to be fell to the another one side, does not to be slide over on to the another one side. So the coin it will be fell with the angle of inclination it will be no down. So the angle of inclination it will be no down. That way easily measure the coefficient of friction. Okay, so the force it will be applied on the coin, it will be measured, and it will be easily calculate the coefficient of measuring friction. எப்படி வந்து ஒரு ஃப்ரிக்ஷன் வந்து எப்படி கோஎஃபிஷியன்ட் ஆஃப் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன் எப்படி மெஷர் பண்ணோன்னா, ஒரு காயினை ஒரு புக் மேலே வச்சுட்டு நீங்கள் இன்க்ளினேஷன் இன்க்ரீஸ் பண்ணிக்கிட்டே வந்தீங்கன்னா எந்த இன்க்ளினேஷன் பாயிண்டில் அது வந்து ஸ்கிட் ஆகி கீழே விழுதோ அந்த பாயிண்ட்டுக்கு பேர் தான் கோஎஃபிஷியன்ட் ஆஃப் ஃப்ரிக்ஷன். ஓகே, ஸோ இந்த டுடே செஷன் ஐ எக்ஸ்பிளைன் தட் static friction, kinetic friction, rolling friction. Static friction, that the friction force it will be oppose the starting point of motion. Kinetic friction will be oppose the relative motion of an object. Rolling friction means using some rollers to to reduce the friction between the two surfaces, so that way easily carry the heavy weight of an object by the rolling friction. And angle of friction means the angle between the normal force and the resultant force. The angle of friction, how to calculate the angle of friction, the tangent of angle of the friction, it will be equal to the coefficient of static friction. And resultant force is equal to square root of the static frictional force square plus normal square. So the tan theta is equal to frictional force, maximum frictional force by normal force, and maximum frictional force is always equal to the static frictional coefficient into the normal force. We substitute the static frictional force in the equation, and then we easily calculate mu s is equal to tan theta. So static coefficient will be equal to the tangent of angle of friction. Okay, and methods to reduce friction already I told, and then push or pull of any one object which is easier. So for first how to calculate the normal force, it will be acting on the pushing an object and pulling an object. First we push an object, we calculate the normal force and calculate the static frictional force, and pull of an object, first we calculate the normal force and static frictional force. So static frictional force enga less ah irukudho andha edathila easily that object it will be move. Okay, so the object it will be move easily to pull an object. Okay, so the angle of repose is always equal to the angle of friction, and angle of friction normal force first calculate, the frictional force to be calculate, and static frictional coefficient to be calculate, equalize the two static frictional coefficient, and easily it will be calculated angle of repose mu s is equal to, in the way of angle of repose mu s is equal to tan theta. The angle of repose is always equal to the angle of friction, and it will be applicable only in the inclined plane. Okay, and then application of angle of repose and Antillean sand traps, one example, and another one is sliding object. And last question is how to measure the coefficient of static friction, by doing one activity to easily measure the coefficient of static friction. Today home assignment, learn and write the difference between the static friction and kinetic friction. Home assignment for today's session. Learn and write the difference between static friction and kinetic friction. Second one, pull or push an object which is easier. Pull and push an object which is easier. Okay, learn the two questions. One is difference between static friction and kinetic friction. Second one is push or pull of an object which is easier. Okay, thank you.